Welcome to the Lobster Talks Podcast by Lobster Capital, where we celebrate the bold thinkers and innovators driving change in the startup world. I'm your host, Gabriel Jarrison, and today I'm thrilled to have Daniel Driscoll, the CEO and co-founder of Elodin, on the pod. Daniel, thank you for being here.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm very, very excited to be talking with you. And Elodin is both not super easy to get, so we're going to do our best to explain what it is. But once you get it, for me, really, really, really fascinating. Please start by introducing yourself, and then let's dive into Elodin.
Sure. Well, as you said, my name is Dan. I'm a ex-military officer, West Point grad, was a officer in the Army, went to Iraq a bunch of times, and then left the Army to join Silicon Valley, kind of the, engineering, software engineering rat race. Did software engineering. I actually joined a company called Electronic Arts, worked on a small game called The Sims 4, launched that, and then got out of the gaming industry in pursuit of startup life. And I joined a little tiny startup by the name of Salesforce, which actually became a huge startup. I actually joined it mid-size. It was about 3,000 or 4,000 people when I joined, but I got to see wild success of a startup, rode that all the way till when it was pretty big, 35,000 people or so, and then took the plunge, started doing Silicon Valley startups at the A size, B size, and did a series of startups that way. Most recently founded Elodin, which we're talking about today.
Brilliant. And so let's dive in. Elodin is, maybe I could say, the OS for space or for flight. How would you describe Elodin? And again, probably people listening to us know nothing about what it is. And I'm saying this because I did find it sort of maybe not very, very easy to get when it's a SaaS product. We're selling a subscription. That's super easy. But for you, it's a little bit specific. So tell us what it is, because it's so cool and fascinating.
Yeah. Well, Elodin is the flight software development platform for aerospace, for things that fly. If you need to write software that tells your drone, satellite, rocket, missile to fly, you need to write software, write code that goes on that craft to fly it through space. There's a lot of physics involved. There's a lot of testing of the physics involved. And my background is in traditional software engineering in Silicon Valley companies, SaaS, B2B, B2C, different companies. But I was used to the rapid iteration development cycles of engineers that can write code in a branch, can test that code in a branch, and then get it reviewed, committed to the mainline, see the complete end-to-end testing and validation of that code, and go out to production. And in really mature, modern SaaS companies, you would see, like Airbnb, for example, was famous for a series of tech talks on how they could have a new developer join, and within minutes of their joining, they could write code, have it reviewed, committed, and pushed all the way out to production in like 15 minutes. And so that ability fuels their ability to innovate, their ability to rapidly produce product. And in aerospace, in recent projects that I worked on, and that my co-founder, Sasha Wise from AstroForge, worked on, the ability to rapidly iterate like that didn't exist. And there wasn't anywhere to go to really buy that or cobble that together easily. So that's where we set out to solve that problem, to create a platform. And I've actually been playing with the idea of how to explain this more quickly. And I've been playing with the idea of, we want to be the Unreal Engine for aerospace, right? Like in the Unreal Engine, from my games background, you build your game and you press the build button and you compile it for iOS or compile it for the PlayStation. And then, you ship the game, and you're building all of that on top of that Unreal platform. And so that is what we are doing. We are allowing you to build everything on top of our platform to ship to the microcontroller that flies your missile.
I was going to get to the Unreal comparison, but I guess that's a great starting point. So thank you for explaining that you're the Unreal or the Unity for space, for flight. Tell us about the kind of the origin story, because I think it's really cool as well. You're basically facing this exact problem, and so was your co-founder in another company in AstroForge that you mentioned, and you decided to join forces and do it together. That's basically how it happened. Tell me the story, please.
Yeah. Well, Sasha and I had worked together for a long time at a company called M10. It was actually an anti-crypto company. We were trying to build infrastructure for central banks that would modernize them and reduce the threat from cryptocurrency for central bank infrastructure. And he was just a shockingly good engineer, shockingly bright individual. And so it was a pleasure to work with him then. He had an opportunity to go work at AstroForge while I was there. And I had an opportunity because we had a Ukrainian-based offshore team that was doing some of our crypto, anti-crypto blockchain development. That team was 10 engineers. They were working out of Kharkiv when the Russian invasion happened and pushed them all out of Kharkiv into Kyiv. And so, like, firsthand, the M10 team kind of worked with them as they got pushed and displaced. And it was just a really compelling moment for me. I was compelled by I saw these people that needed help, but also I saw the volunteering of a friend of mine, a guy named Andrew, a classmate from West Point, who joined the French Foreign Legion. And I started getting on some calls with him, and he was explaining to me that they had this dire threat of drones, kamikaze drones, overwatch of their positions. He was literally in the trenches on the front lines as part of the Foreign
Wow.
Legion and doing video calls with me on Signal, showing me there's a drone, explaining that because now they've been spotted, they need to go take cover, the whole thing. So with the Ukrainian software engineers that I had been working with for over a year, we just hatched a plan. Like, what could we do? And we started working on rockets. And we worked on a computer vision model. My prop here, this is my RPG 7, but we worked on a guided rocket. And this was just active servo stabilized with just a little computer vision camera. And some of this stuff is still, the computer vision model is still being used. But one of the things we ran into a lot of problems with was high fidelity physics simulation and rapid iteration of the software to fly it. It was just really slow as you will see in normal aerospace today, but shockingly slow to me, because I expected this would be just like any other software problem. And naive, I'm sure, but still I thought it would be surmountable. That was my first exposure, and so that gave me the impetus to reach out to Sasha and ask him, hey, you're at AstroForge and you can't tell him any secrets, no ITAR violations here, but how do you set up a software team for success here? How do you build this stack correctly? And so that began a 6-month kind of conversation journey, exploring that. He was building the simulation stack at AstroForge and the flight software just pipeline. So he was going through that, had been going through that for a while. By the time we got to a year from now, last summer, is when he also saw the opportunity, and we both joined forces, started Elodin, and started working on this product. We started on the simulation stack on the basically how do we do model-based design is the vernacular. The popular model-based design tool in the space is Simulink. It's a MathWorks product, similar to MATLAB, but you design the model of your physical environment, gravity, wind, all the things. And you then create your control systems in the loop of that physics. And so we set about to do that, but pure software, no dragging boxes, no clicking buttons, all code, all committed to a repo, code repository, so that you could do proper, CI/CD, continuous delivery of software.
And thank you for the story. Really inspiring, born from a real need and a real situation. And I want you, please, to talk about a little bit about competition. You just very briefly started about Simulink, but basically, and that's again what I found fascinating about your story, the incumbents and the existing systems are used by huge companies, NASA, Lockheed Martin, whatever. They have thousands and thousands of employees and developers for those systems, but there's nothing agile. There's nothing where you can work together on the same code and ship it, where you can test, when you can have a repository and collaborate, where you can iterate and test quickly. Nothing like that exists on the market. That's insane. You're the very first solution.
Yeah, it's certainly, there's nothing to give you a starting point. Now, there are what they would classify as new space companies. There are space companies. Astronis is one, Starfish is one, that are modern. SpaceX is one even. They're probably the first of the new space. And Dural is on the military side, has been doing the same thing. They basically all came with a deep respect for software engineering as a discipline and backed it with the funding and resources to build internal tooling that would get them to where they wanted. So people are doing this. They're just doing it at great cost. In terms of our competition, though, what's interesting is that there's actually a cultural problem in aerospace in general, where the key of this agile software development is that you can get to an MVP, like a vertical slice of people talk about this all the time when you're trying to build your app. You want to get the narrowest vertical slice of your app where you can have the front end, the back end, the infrastructure all deployed together as a unit and tested, like the smallest amount of that serves the first, customer need, whatever the smallest need is. And you build from there. That's agile. You build from the skeleton of what you need to build and build outward. Whereas modern aerospace, or like the current aerospace culture, doesn't think of it that way. They think about the entire requirement suite of the entire project that it needs to ship. And then they kind of build it, in big chunks at a time and much more akin to a waterfall style. And in that world, you have this separation of teams. What we first discovered was a group of people called Joshua knew this, I discovered it. This group called the Guidance and Navigation Controls Engineers. These are the guys who are really great at math and physics. They're very good at creating algorithms and control systems within that space, but they don't actually work with writing the software on the hardware. And the way this plays out is, say, you have somebody who uses Simulink or uses Python to write their own physics in Python, libraries like JAX or NumPy, different mathematics algorithms you're writing in Python. And they solve the control system there. But think of it as like one department. You got GNC, this is the department over there. And if it's big enough, there's even a simulation team separate from the GNC people. So GNC people are working in the simulation team. And then when they have their product, their actual control systems, they hand that to your C++ engineers who actually then write the C++ code that gets compiled down for binaries on an actual microcontroller. So this is the cultural world that we are disrupting. And selling into this space is interesting because we have to start with the premise that people recognize the need to change that or flip it on its head. You need people who actually understand, kind of like in a game team, like we talked about before. If you can get the GNC engineer, the sim engineer, the flight software engineer, all in one little team, a SWAT team together to work on their product together in a small team for rapid iteration, you get effectively what we're going to create in a platform. And so it's the shift of, we're not just a new technology, we are harbingers of a paradigm shift that has to happen in order to build this way.
And you're right to be more precise that it's not that it doesn't exist like at SpaceX, it does exist, but it was internal and you're bringing it to everyone else as a software. That's the big kind of nuance here that I didn't mention, but that's also interesting because we're having now a space renaissance. And I'm guessing many of our listeners know this, and I've noticed this, but if they haven't, can you maybe talk a little bit about the space renaissance? Because it's happening and it's huge and it's super important for the US Army and for humanity in general. What's the space renaissance and what did it bring? Like, what are the characteristics of that renaissance in your opinion?
Yeah. Well, the number of new startups that are going to space is an obvious metric. And we were the Y Combinator community was a great fit for us because that community both contains new space companies and there are many new space companies that are joining Y Combinator all the time. So we aim to serve those who've already come through and validated our premise and also to serve the ones that are the new startups that are emerging. And so we aim to be right at the starting point for all of them and serving their needs. Every one of those new space startups faces the problem of how do I build my flight software? And they often have to build expensive things in-house from scratch or take a lot of risk. A lot of them just take a huge amount of risk and just launch it anyway and do their best to see what happens and just kind of build that way, which is still cheaper and faster than the previous culture. Other metrics you could look at is just simply the cost of kilogram to get to space. So right now, the cost of kilogram going to space, and I don't know the hard numbers, but it's in the order of tens of thousands of dollars per kilogram, but rapidly dropping, especially you saw the Starship launch. I'm sure you got up early or woke up later, whatever time zone it is for you. But for me, it was 7 a.m. I had my girls watch the launch with me and it was a great launch and super successful. We kind of been had our expectations slightly lowered the last couple launches because things always break a little bit more dramatically. And this time, was great and it was super exciting. So as that comes online, just by virtue of the fact that they increase launch, they increase the number of kilograms you can get to space, increase of this supply of launch capacity, the cost will come down. And one might think, well, the cost, won't come down because the demand won't be there. But as you've seen with all the new space companies, clearly there's huge demand. I predict that you're going to have college aerospace teams, if not high school science projects, getting on board to these space companies. If anything, the companies that are making their market around space tracking and deorbiting of trash and cleanup, those guys are also good bets because they're going to have their work cut out for them.
For sure. I haven't invested directly in deorbiting or trash space cleanup, but it is for sure it's like the ocean cleanup right now. We're cleaning up the oceans, and we're going to need to clean up space in a couple of years. For reference, we're taping this in June 2024. So we're obviously talking about Starship from SpaceX. I didn't watch it live. It was in the middle of the night. I watched it replay. But yeah, we just had launch 4, if I'm not mistaken, which was very successful. And it's coming, it's getting better every time, iterating rather quickly. And it's like highways. You build the highways, first day, maybe there's no one there, but people are like, oh, there's a highway. It's actually very cool and cheap and whatever. And so with a couple months and years, they start using it. And it's rumored, or it's written, commonly known, I guess I should say, that Starship is going to reduce again the price by a factor of 30x, something like that. And so you're right. Almost anyone could launch a small CubeSat or a small satellite into space. And more people are going to use that. And so that's probably what started the space renaissance, is the SpaceX already really drastically cutting the cost of orbiting. And so there's a lot of new space companies. Like you mentioned, you just said it very quickly, but I want to double click on that. Many of those space companies are actually in YC. That's for the past. There's a lot of very cool, space companies and the space renaissance in YC. And in the future as well, YC just released a couple weeks ago their request for startups, which I'm sure you've seen. And one of the 20 categories, there's only 20 types of startups that they're looking for, is space companies. And so again, all of those new space companies are going to need software, and they're going to come to you, to Elodin. And so now let's dive in. You've launched your software, you've sold it, you went through YC a couple months ago, it went well, congratulations. And now you're doing some very, very cool stuff. I believe you're going in the desert to see a missile getting launched or tested. Like, tell us where this is taking you, because you must be having so much fun.
Yeah. Well, so as I was telling you before, we focused on the physics simulation aspect as code first. And we actually, pushed that first to sell that, to design control systems for our first customer that signed with us, is a surface-to-air missile company, not too dissimilar to the rocket that I showed you. And so we've expanded that now to the full flight software platform, and that's what we've been working on. But this company that was our first customer is going out to the Mojave to a test launch this week on Wednesday, of their first design that was with our control system. And so I'm going out there for the launch to help troubleshoot them and figure out, just to collect data and take validation. So we're getting now, the real proof is when you see real physical products flying. And so we see our very first customer now actually test launching. And so we're going to, be able to learn with them. They were our first close development partner. We have 2 others in the queue. One's a drone company and one's a satellite company. And so, this will be the kind of close partnership we'll be doing with these customers, so that we are tuning this, making sure that it's the best possible, flight software platform. So I'll be driving out on Wednesday early, driving out to the just a Mojave Desert missile launch site, and we'll see. It'll be high adventure for me. I've never been out to like a legit, first military grade launch facility, except for since when I was in the Army. But we did tanks there. Tank gunnery is different. It's fun, but different than missiles. Yeah.
That's awesome. Take selfies and take videos. I want to see them. What's cool as well is you're pretty, let's say, agnostic. You mentioned drones, you mentioned missiles, you mentioned satellites. Basically, as long as it's flying, as long as there's physics involved, gravity, wind or air. In space, obviously, there's no wind or air, but I'm guessing to get to space, maybe you could do rockets as well. You could be at some point working for SpaceX. I mean, they probably have their own thing, but potentially you could do rockets as well, right?
Actually, next week, I'm very excited to be attending the Spaceport America Cup. It is the World Championship of Amateur Rocketry. There'll be 130 student teams in attendance from all over the world, and some of the fancier engineer schools. Yeah, and I'm going there. I'm going to be actually shadowing the Berkeley team. They've invited me to kind of hang out with them and see what it's all about, and to actually do some simulations of their rocket to see how they are going to perform, see if we can't validate what they actually do in the wild based on what we can simulate their model is. It's actually a great opportunity to use our product as kind of engineering as marketing, because what we can do is we can take the open rocket specification file that all students have to design their rocket with, and we can then basically create just a quick web app to drop that file, translate it into an Elodin sim, and then be able to share that with their friends with the URL link. So it's kind of a fun little guerrilla marketing thing that we're queuing up with this. But I'm very excited to get out there. It's in New Mexico. It's right next to the White Sands Missile Complex. I know it seems like I probably fixated heavily on the missiles aspect of all this right now. I don't mean to imply that we're heavily just a missiles only thing, like you said. The platform is just like in the game engine analogy again. You could make, an iPad game just in Unreal Engine, just like you could make a, first person shooter Call of Duty type game, right? You can make any of these types of actual potential targets and business use cases that you're going after. The core platform, what supports the building of all that, the writing the software, the testing of it, the tuning and making the game fun, that is what the platform supports. And so that is the stuff that is common. And likewise, that is what we are doing. We are supporting the modeling of the physics in lots of different situations. It's a completely open physics engine. Whereas in Simulink context, you can do almost anything in Simulink, but it very much guides you down the path of using kind of everything Simulink has set up for you, and not so much you doing everything kind of fully open. That was actually one of the discoveries we had early on. We thought originally that it would be most useful to do what other game engines did. Just bake in a physics engine. This is how physics work. This is the order in which math is calculated for your environment. And we very quickly learned that what the control systems engineer wants, what a GNC engineer wants, is to be able to fully define what order the calculations. Like I want gravity to affect this thing, then I want wind to affect it. I don't want it the other way around. I want to be able to talk about with each time step, what is the order of operations, and have that level of control. And so that's what we've done. And that's why it's, as a platform, it's fully open. That doesn't mean that you don't have to do work. It's just like with a game. You build your game, you create the assets, you create the art, you write the scripts for the gameplay. It's tons of work. It's a huge amount of work with games. Just likewise with that, though. You're building the model of the world that you're going to use, your simulation, and you're building your controls algorithms to operate within that world, and you're testing it. And so it's all about really not that you don't do work, that you do the work very fast and you test it very fast and all the ways you can test it. And so in our platform, where that comes out is I make code changes. And just like with a SaaS ID, I want to make code changes and I want to see something's wrong very quick within seconds. That's the first loop. But then I also want to be able to test something and see whether or not the graphs that are generated from the data that's running is right or wrong very quickly. I need that to be fast. I need to be almost real time. I need to see the results. And then that goes all the way through to when I test this in the field. So when our missile friends are testing their missile launch, they need to be able to collect their data and bring it back into the platform and see what happened in the actual platform view compared to what they thought would happen, what actually happened, and now they can help refine their model. Making all of that as tight a loop as possible is the key of the software development in this space.
And again, taking what's basic for a software developer, what people do on a daily basis, you change the code, ship it, test it, iterate. Before Elodin would take weeks or at least days, if not weeks. And you're making this almost as instant as possible or as quick as possible. I want to kind of step back, put some perspective on this and ask you what advice you would give to founders, because I'm trying to see if we can replicate what you did. I always like taking an idea in one vertical and transposing it into another place. And maybe someone could do the same thing in industry X, Y, or Z. An industry where there's very old software and there's a lot of new early startups that don't have the capacity to build such expensive tools and just build it for them. So what would be your advice to someone trying to either build in the space industry? Maybe there's some other needs that Elodin is not, you're not competing with, or in another industry taking a similar approach. How would you go about that? And what advice would you give to founders trying to do that?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think the key feeling to chase when you're in that position of this kind of when you think that it should be just like a, at least for me, it was being shocked that things are as bad as they are, shocked that this is the way something is, and just not letting that sit right with you. And this is actually an interesting discovery with some of the people that we've met in the aerospace industry. And I don't want to talk negatively about anybody in their culture industries. This is not what I'm trying to convey, is not negativity, but in the companies that I've worked at, there's a general intolerance for inefficiency, and especially in software engineering companies. And this might be because when you're a software engineer and you're writing software engineer, but the tools you're using are also built by software engineers, there's just kind of this inherent demand for best tools, for best iteration, for best. If something feels really painful, there's less tolerance for it. And so when I found that the pain was high for doing this kind of development, and then you start asking the questions, why is that? Does it have why does it have to be that way? There's a great number of people in the aerospace industries who just throw up their hands and say, well, this is how it is. In this industry, this is just, you follow, you hit these check boxes, you do it because of this compliance reasons, and this is my lane, and this is where I work, and that's not my lane over there, and so I'm going to work within my lane. So if there are people amongst your audience that find themselves kind of compressed in this lane that they don't feel like should exist, or, I would say, do not tolerate it. Do not allow for that to become the thing that exists, the status quo that has to happen. That I think that kind of friction is what befalls lots and lots of big companies, even software companies, but it exists everywhere. And just being able to recognize that and demanding it to be better, I think is the motivator that I use here. And so if other people find that and can draw motivation from that, that's a good reason to go off. But it's unlikely someone is ever going to fix that internally. And you may try, and that may actually give you more fuel, more fire, because you tried and you ran into the walls and you couldn't do it. And so therefore you're going to go off and you're going to pitch an idea to give you a chance to fix it outside. The other advice I'd give is that just understand it will be challenging, even once you then go and build the better way, to convince all the people who don't believe it's possible for there to be a better way. First Round, actually, I think, had a really good article on this about, whether or not these kind of things could be, whether or not these intractable customers, will actually move, whether or not, or whether they'll just accept the pain that they have. So, yeah. But anyway, that's the other piece of advice I'd have, is that just to regard a plan for going after how to break into your old colleagues. Now, hopefully actually, several of the YC companies we've had in our batch and previous, that's one of the things they leveraged, was the fact that they came from a place that had the opportunity. And so they used their personal relationships and personal connections to be able to get back in and sell back in, because they know people. And that's very valuable. When you don't know people and you're trying to sell into an industry, it's much harder.
That's fascinating for me. It's reminding me of Steve Jobs, Elon Musk. It's people who don't accept mediocrity, or they don't accept the status quo. There's I remember in Steve Jobs' biography, at some point, he wants the Mac to boot faster. And the engineer is like, no, I've done everything. It's going to take 10 seconds to boot. It's just not possible. And Steve Jobs was like, I don't care. Make it boot faster anyway. And same thing with Elon Musk. The whatever alloy or material for the rocket was too heavy or something, and the engineer was like, this is it, and he was like, nope, make it lighter anyway. And
Yeah.
And what's crazy is it's a mix of people feel bad and this guy is insane and he just tells me something impossible, but at the end of the day, some of the crazy demands end up happening, or maybe they meet halfway, or something they said it was impossible, they actually made it happen. So
yeah. What you're describing is much of the product leader who demands excellence and demands the best. And that is definitely one direction to come at it. In my case, it's more on the engineering leader side, and this is one of the things that I'd recommend to people, is the only reason I knew that things could be better is because I had a lot of experiences, and a lot of right experiences, right? I had experiences where places were slow, and I had experiences where places demanded, excellence and were fast. So I would say, when, if people are younger and they're not yet ready to start a startup, but make sure you also don't forget to have experiences that expose you to how high the bar can be. Because if you don't have that, then you won't necessarily have the gut reaction of, this is terrible, this needs to be fixed. You need to develop that with experience and context.
Yeah, that's very true. I like that as well.
Or just read, be passionate about, through vicariously through others. Lots of ways to do that. I don't necessarily mean you have to do 15 years of engineering experience like I did. to get to that place. So obviously a couple of jobs in really great organizations can do that too.
I love that very, very much. Brilliant. And so let's move on to, thank you for all the advice. I'm sure a lot of people will take this to heart. Move on to our next topic. I wanted to chat with you about fundraising. You went through YC, you fundraised, and congratulations. And interestingly, it's a conversation we had together before the show. You ended up raising mostly not from VCs, if I'm correct. And I think you've noticed, as I have, that it's quite a big trend in YC now to raise from individuals, from angels, from the YC community itself, which is huge. And so do you think that's a good thing? Were you looking for a VC, or were you specifically looking for individuals? To kind of walk us through what happened there. Are you happy about that, etc.?
Well, for sure. Y Combinator gives great advice throughout while you're doing the different fundraising steps. They don't focus heavily on the fundraising. They focus on traction up front is the thing you need to show, so that when you have the conversations with VCs, they go well because you have great, reasons to invest. And that was all solid. It was my first rodeo with doing the whole meeting investors and that entire fun adventure. And so I learned a lot. What I noticed, in our batch, there's a lot of our batch was AI focused. And so a lot of the AI focused opportunities drew a lot of the VC attention from what this is all my perspective. I obviously don't have all the insider data everywhere, but from what I could tell, the way VCs were very interested in AI, we were building a platform that might be valuable for AI training in the future, but it wasn't explicitly an AI play of any kind. So if we're not AI, the other thing they were looking for was having really solid traction numbers, lots and lots of people buying. And because we were building a very, very ambitious project, building this entire thing of building the Unreal game engine, right, in a year, like how long would you imagine it would take you to build the Unreal game engine? A long time. And so, we're building that. Our best fit people were actually angels and family offices and just people who were really motivated about the vision over everything else. And so we gravitated to them. They gravitated to us. And so everybody we raised from, and I love our cap table. Our whole cap table is just all the best people from YC and just referrals from that group of people. I'm privileged to have collected the best people, but none of them are venture capital firms, or at least there's a couple who are smaller checks from VC firms, but none of the big lead investors that sweep most of you around. I didn't learn this toward the end, but somebody called it a party round, apparently. The party round is when you bring a party of people to raise your whole fund instead of one big check.
Would you say that's, it seems you're happy with the outcome. Would you actually advise potentially startups not to raise from a big fund? Is it that much better that you think a party run is better? Is it equivalent? Is there, what's the positives? What's the negatives?
Yeah, there's pros and cons. The con would be, I think I met over almost 200 investors, right? So I had a lot of investor calls. So you spend a lot of time and energy. If you are a solid extrovert, then, you'll have a good time meeting lots of people. If you're an introvert like me, more on the engineering side, or just want to build things, you have to just basically get ready to really put yourself out there and be excited to meet people, be excited to share your story, be genuine and authentic. And those are the people those are going to be your angels, the people who are actually excited to back you and your idea because they want to, jump on board. On the pro side, all the people who back you really believe in you and they're very present. Yeah. So like all of them you can pretty much reach out to and have a very personal relationship with, which is great. And I much prefer that as an introvert, having genuine connections with individuals rather than having a larger VC fund that, that is your big fund that backs you, but also, and granted, I can't actually speak from experience because I don't have a giant firm that backs me. So I don't actually know what that experience is like, but I know that with angels, they're great and that they give me advice all the time. I send them updates. They tell me things. And so I definitely feel supported throughout.
That's awesome. Daniel, we're approaching the end of our time together, which I've loved, but I do have a couple more questions. One is, what's coming up? What's the future for Elodin? Something in either near or longer term future, either way you choose, but that you're really excited about, that Elodin is going to allow its users to do?
Oh yeah, sure. No, I'm really excited. So one of our we have a couple things that we're, cooking in the works, but one of the ones that I'm most excited about that we're putting a lot of energy behind is getting actually to space. So one of our close development partners. I sworn to secrecy, so I'm not going to share it right now. But they're going to get to space within the next couple months by October, November timeframe, and they will be running our flight software platform. So we're going to be working in lockstep with them to get them to orbit to have a successful mission, and we will be able to say, "Look at that! That's a Elodin flight software right there running that." And it's not enough just to fly. We need to be an accelerant. We need to actually show that by following this paradigm shift that we can have a serious impact for a smaller company to have a bigger success than otherwise would have been possible. And so we're very motivated for that mission to succeed. And so getting to space in a real world way this year, pointing to that success, being able to sell that to other new space startups, all huge upcoming wins for us. We also got a couple potential platform partners to sell through, where they're people who are doing similar things than us, but they want some of our physics modeling and visual fidelity and graphing and just performance. One of the things about my team is that they are exceptional software engineers writing low-level code in Rust, and they're obsessed with performance. And so as a result, you get very, very high-performing visuals, graphs, data pipelines, all the stuff that can grind to a halt when people are just kind of slapping stuff on top and not actually taking that as seriously. So very excited about those things. And when those are more firmed up, I can share what that looks like.
That's awesome. Hopefully I can have you again on the pod maybe next year, and you can talk about going to space. But that's super, super exciting. I cannot wait to see Elodin software in space. I was going to say congratulations, because the fact that you're already getting there already, I guess, justifies congratulations. But let's keep the real ones for when you actually fly. A question I do ask to everyone coming on this show: what's a quote or a book that has a huge importance to you in your life?
Man, well, you're going to do the book question. As you can see, I have some ones here to use. Well, the one that I always ask people to read if they really want to understand me and my leadership style, the book, the Simon Sinek book, Leaders Eat Last, was always a very effective, a really great book that I've read multiple times over, that really touches on, it unlocked for me understanding when you're trying to reach people and trying to understand what makes them tick, motivated, everything. It really tapped into looking at it from the perspective of brain chemistry and how the brain chemicals work and how you use those to, whether or not you need to, how you use them as a good leader. And it's interesting because a lot of times when you read a management book, it's all about tapping into EQ over IQ and various things like that. But this was just a very retrospectively effective way for me to look at leadership and understanding how to unlock superpowers in that way. So that's a big book for me. It's interesting now that I'm in the CEO role, it's a little different. This was really important for me in the Army lieutenant leadership role or the engineering manager leadership role. Those were always effective. Now in the CEO leadership role, it's yet another new challenge. So happy to field any book suggestions you might have, or any of your viewers might have, because I'm always consuming the next podcast or book to help out.
I can tell you're an avid reader, as I am. Thank you for the recommendation. You can look at all the other episodes of the podcast. Each episode has a book or a quote recommended at the very end. But Daniel, it's been amazing to have you on the show today. Thank you for sharing your insights and your story with us. For listeners, where can they find you and Elodin online?
Well, it's elodin.systems is the website. I'm Dan at elodin.systems. So that's easy. If you want to try out our application, it's open now for free trial. It's at app.elodin.systems.
Brilliant. Thank you again for joining, Daniel. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe for more conversations like this. And don't forget to rate us and leave a review on your favorite podcast platform. Until next time on the Lobster Talks, stay bold, stay curious, and remember, those big ideas start somewhere.